Hello everyone and welcome to this little vlog where I'm going to be taking a little bit of time out from all my other important things. There's no other important things. We're going to be looking at some dungeon furniture because it's Dungeonalia. We may as well get roped into something for Dungeonalia. So it's my turn this time. And we're going to be using our new 12K printer. That is the Saturn 3 Pro. I believe it's a Saturn 3 Pro. Saturn 3 Ultra. I think that's the name of it. It says in CheatyBox anyway. I have some files that have been given to me by Lloyd and Ben. They're all from Thingiverse, so the list of items are going to be down below. We'll obviously credit those creators that have made that stuff as well, where you can get them as well. All the files are free. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you how to run the newer printer and briefly talk about its setup and stuff like that. So on my screen behind me here, I have CheatyBox. This is just the free version of it. I used to be subscribed and then realized I'm not really getting a lot of bang for my buck, and so to speak, you know, the little bit of extra editability and stuff like that wasn't really working out for me. So I decided just to stick with the free version. So we have some files. We're going to load them into CheatyBox. We're going to make ourselves up a bed of dungeon furniture. Then we'll go over to the printer and show a setup from empty and clean and ready to run. Because this printer is particularly good and very user-friendly, as well as beginner-friendly, I would say, as well as probably one of the more beginner-friendly printers that I've come across. And it's printing in 12K, which is not really that big a deal for us miniature people. Not miniatures in stature, I mean miniature as in we're printing miniatures. So it's 12K is okay if you're doing larger pieces, if you're doing larger things that require a higher resolution on them. For us, 8K really is all we really need to print miniatures and small stuff. But what it doesn't need with 12K, it brings along in a lot of user-friendly ability. So it's a printer I'm starting to really appreciate. I've printed off a fair bit of stuff on it now just to get a feel for the machine. And as much as I love my Mars 3, and we've used Shay's Saturn as well, and they're both great machines, I think the Ultra is sort of just a little bit better in its design and stuff. Anyway, that aside, we're going to go over to CheatyBox and start laying out a bed. So when we open CheatyBox, this is what we're faced with. This is our build plate. This is where everything is going to go. Over here, we have settings. So we want to go onto settings and check that we've selected the right printer. In this case, it's the Elegoo Saturn 3 Ultra. That is the printer we're going to be using. That's fine. What I have this set to is the base settings, because through my testing of the machine early on, these are very good settings. These are fine. So all the print quality and everything like that, standard resin, normal, everything is just the basic settings that CheatyBox give the machine. That has worked for me so far. Now, let's get some models in. So I've got a few bits and bobs here that I'm going to throw in. So I've got a set of desk and drawers, sort of an alchemist table here. And we can just rotate around that. That is exactly what we want. It's in the orientation that we want because we want all these small details to be printed last. That way there's not going to be many supports or anything to worry about there. It also has a good contact position on the build plate itself. So not much of a need for supports there either, which is great. So let's throw in a few more things. I've got some chairs I can throw in. Like that. They're just a simple little chair. Nothing fancy there. We'll throw in a few other bits and bobs here as well, just to fill out. We have some bookcases like that. These are quite large. What I'll do is up here in the corner, you see select all. We want to deselect that. That stops them shining blue. So when we select an object, it comes up blue. Then we can Control C, Control V if we want more. So let's do 2 of those. Let's do a second one of those. And for chairs, we'll just put a few more of those in because chairs are always handy to have, especially when we're going to put other stuff down. So let me see about getting a couple of other things in here. We have a set of shelves. think we'll put that on there, and then we'll Control-C, Control-V that, and we'll get 2 of them. We'll arrange these properly in a second. I'm just trying to make sure I have everything I want. I don't want that. Oh, maybe we do. So another bookshelf, and this one lies flat on its back, which is again great for not needing any supports. We'll shove that out of the way. So let's arrange these a little bit. So we'll just move the chairs into a neat little line. They can almost bump right up against each other, but we don't necessarily need them to do that for this print, but they can be pretty close. Move that desk over there, get our shelf onto the bed properly. Something like that. Let's see what else, because we still have a fair bit of space to play with. So we haven't printed one of those yet, so let's see. We have a tomb, which has a guy on it. Now that obviously isn't going to sit in that rotation, so what I'm thinking of doing is we're going to rotate it. Z-axis is the blue ring, so if I select that and just hit 90, that gives us a 90-degree turn, and then we can slide that onto the bed. Now to even up the bed a little, we're going to move the tomb sort of more central, and then bring the shelf back in there. The reason I'm doing that is it's quite a significant object, as well as these 2 bookcases, and I want the pull on my release film to be roughly equal. I don't want it to be pulling to one side more so than any other. With the way this is laid out, it's going to be pulling a little bit more at the back after about the 50%, 60% mark. That's okay, I'm not worried about that. The way this printer's set up, it should actually work rather well. Now, let's make a second one of those. And again, we can rotate that. Blue is the Z-axis, make that 90 degrees. And we can fit that in roughly there if we bump that up a little bit. That to me looks okay. It's not touching anything. Oh, it is. It's touching that a little bit. Yeah, we don't want that. So let's make that in such a way that it's not interfering. What we'll do is bring these chairs over. Again, not too worried about how close they're going to be. We're not going to completely ram this bed full of stuff. And then that should sit in there a bit more equally. That looks fine to me. Now, that's what we want to print on this bed. I have a second bed that I've already saved out and ready to print that has a lot more on it. So what we can do, this has a few different pieces, or a few samey pieces. What we're going to do here is select all. We'll move over to this tab up here in the top right. This is to generate supports. And what it's doing here is figuring out where supports are going to go before we apply them. So that little blue bar should eventually stop and tell me it's figured out what it's doing. Okay, it now knows where the supports are going to go. And what I've done on this as a bit of an experiment, because a lot of these parts have very flat backs, for example, no texture on those. These don't have very much, and underneath there's not a lot in the back of these shelves, there's nothing. I would say for the printer, we have enough contact space that we don't need to raise the parts off the bed to apply supports underneath them. So what I've done is used the Z lift height, which is how far these items are going to come off the build plate. I've set that to 0, so you can see up here. That is what that is, and it even demonstrates for you in the 3D what that means. I've set that to 0 because I think this contact point is enough for these parts to be stable on the bed. Now, because they're all squared off, they don't need to be rotated in any silly way. So what I want to do now is apply supports that are going to support the parts on the shelving or parts on the tomb up front here and stuff like that. So I have all that selected, and then we just hit all. And you'll see as it starts to work through each item individually, it'll start applying supports wherever it feels like it needs them. And then once it's done that, we can have a look around and we can see what our next step's going to be. So with the supports having generated themselves. Let's have a look at what it's done. A little bit on the tomb because there's some overhangs. It's just protecting that bottom layer. When it starts to print that, it's not going to be wavy or do anything silly. On these shelves, there's a little bit on the stuff behind them. Under the chairs, there's a little bit, not too much. They're just supporting some overhangs. Same on these shelves, they've got some texture in the back and there's a little bit of supports needed there. Mostly the supports are for the books that you can see in the bookcases. So that's fine. There's a little bit being added onto the alchemist desks, but there's not going to be a lot of visible supports there that are really going to annoy us in any way. At this point, we are now ready to slice the file. So let's go to this other tab up here. We can go down here and hit slice, and this will prepare us a file that is going to give us an estimate of how long it's going to take to print and generate all the layers ready for printing. Okay, and that is now finished and has come up with, let me see, 5.5 to 6 hours, so 539, that's about right. We have the volume in milliliters, which is 169.75. That's how much resin it's going to use to create the parts and create the supports. Gives us an estimated weight as well. So what we can do here is also see the layers, and it tells us what layer it is, and that's us going from top down. And you can see what each layer is doing. So you can see like the last 30–40% is going to be just the 2 bookshelves at the back. Let's just run that back up to the top. And with that, we can now save. I have a USB drive already in, and I believe the other one is called Dungeon Furniture, so we're going to name this one Dungeon Furniture 2. That way we've got both our beds saved, we know exactly what they are when we look at them. So we're going to let this save, we're going to have a little bit of a swish, and then we'll come back and look at the printer itself. So with our files done in CheatyBox and put onto our little pen drive here, we're now ready to attend to our printer. So this is our new Saturn Pro, and the first thing we need to do after we've switched the machine on, which it is on, is we need to remove our tank, which screws out like so. Now, if any of you read the article that I wrote, this is ACF release film. You can see it's kind of cloudy looking. It's been through a few prints already and doesn't seem to have much of any damage or discoloration or anything on the inside of it, which is great. So far so good with that, actually. I will go more into detail on that on another day. Now, the first thing we want to do with the machine freshly switched on is level the bed. So we have this happy little leveling card, which comes with it. All we need to do is place that over the screen. We then need to take an Allen key, and up here there are 4 Allen nuts to loosen. So we just need to loosen each of them up. And this is what I prefer of this printer's design over the Saturn II, or the standard Saturn II, is that it doesn't have a ball joint that orientates the bed. It's just these 4 points of contact that allow it to be more stable while printing. It means there's also 4 points of failure for the bed to lose its level, rather than just the one where the ball joint would potentially fail. So we'll make sure this is nice and loose. So the bed is sitting loosely on there. Down here, I'm just going to move my camera down, and let's zoom in on the menu so you can see what we're doing. So on the machine, we want to go to Tool. We want to set manual. We want to go back to 0. And what that's doing is bringing the printer head down. So you can see that's the build plate coming down. That will set itself to a 0 point based on a micro switch back here in the rails. And it'll settle. That is now the actual leveling arm behind the bed at its 0 point, which means all we need to do with this is put our hand on it and lightly press down as we tighten up each of these nuts. So what I like to do is corner to corner. And just make sure they're tightened up. They're all one-sided screws, so you've got to remember that one side is going to rotate differently than the other. Be careful not to over-tighten them, because if you over-tighten them, you're going to reduce the longevity and the lifespan of this particular part. Now that we have that done, let's go back to our menu. We want to hit the back button, set Z equals 0, which is this top right. Press that, confirm. We'll go back to manual, we'll set to 50mm and go up 3 times. That's going to clear the screen and allow us room for the bed to go back on. We can remove the leveling card. We can now replace the bed or the tank back into the machine, which will sit down into its own little area. Let's just scan back up there. So that actually sits into 4 little areas on the machine. We then want to tighten the bed or the tank down, just to the point where the screws stop turning so that it can't lift. Right, next step. I'm going to pan down again. We're going to take our USB stick and insert it into the machine. Wrong way. Need a bit. I don't have a lot of space between these machines. Nope, that is definitely, it was the right way the right time, the last time. Or was it? Okay, pen drive now in, eventually. It's always the way with USBs. Now, on our menu, we want to go back again. We want to go to print. We have a USB, a local, and history. We'll go to USB. Now we have a scroll. So we can scroll through and see our 2 dungeon furniture beds. So we have Dungeon Furniture 1, which is the one I made off camera, and Dungeon Furniture 2, which is the one we made here for the vlog. What we're going to do is long press, and that brings up a little selector. So what I'm going to do is select Dungeon Furniture and Dungeon Furniture 2. Then there's a little button up here, copy. I want to copy this to local. This is a great little feature because these files will now be localized on the machine in its own internal storage. What that means is it avoids a problem that we've had in the past with our standard Saturn II, which is it loses connection to its USB port. That ruins the print, that stops the print, causes errors. So we're going to have everything stored locally that'll allow us to print while using this USB stick to either use the Saturn II at the same time or go back to the PC and prepare some more files for printing later on. So we'll wait for these to transfer and then we'll carry on with setting up the printer. With the files transferred to the local drive on the machine itself, we can go back out of this. We can actually now disconnect our USB stick. That obviously switches off the USB option. We are now ready to print. This whole machine is now ready to go. So we need to take some resin, which in this case is our Anycubic water wash resin. This is in grey. So we give the bottle a bit of a shake because resin can actually settle to cause it to build a thicker layer at the bottom of the bottle if it's been sat for a while. This has been sat for a week, so it's good to just give it a shake. Let's open it up, and now we're going to pour in. Just under the max level a little bit there, because this tank will hold, I think, about 700 milliliters. It's the majority of a 1 kilogram bottle, so it's quite a lot. Now that we're ready to start, let's go to local file and let's go down to Dungeon Furniture. So this will be the first one I made off camera. So let's select that. It's all sat there on the local, ready to print, and away we go. So what we'll do is just monitor the first layer or so, make sure it's working right, And then it's just a case of letting it run for, I think it's about the 6 hours that this is going to take. This is future John talking, and I'm going to make a quick addendum to laying out the print bed. So I was saying a couple of days back when I was filming it first, I decided not to put any Z lift height, which would lift the model off the bed before adding supports. I tried that and it did not work. The reason it didn't work is because I don't know, it's sometimes with free files, no matter what you do with the print settings, there's going to be a layer of resin underneath. In this case, it printed about 3 millimeters of resin and then made the support. So what happened is at the bottom of the model got embedded in that lowest layer and has basically ruined everything that was going to be printed. So what I've done is remade a new bed with the dungeon furniture on it and given it a lift height of 5 mil. That just clears it completely off the bed and then takes the supports as normal. So that's my only addendum to that. So everything else from before and what's going to be done next with the printer is exactly the way I'm setting it up again. Just this time the models are not touching the build plate. That is my mistake, and that was me being an idiot thinking I was going to be smart, when in reality I wasn't very smart at all. Well, here we are. All the 3D printed dungeon terrain is done. As Lloyd has mentioned in a Weekender quite recently, he got me to do a load more and then took it for himself and left me to do this amount of work. However, he didn't leave before setting up a nice little display for us here with one of the Loki, because I don't know which way you want to pronounce it, book of battle mats. And we have our terrain sat out in here in a bunch of rooms with a few monsters that we've pulled off the shelves just to give it a bit of character. So you can see what, this is actually the first time I've seen one of these books actually being used with some terrain and figures, so it's kind of nice. I can see the appeal finally, after, years. But in general, we have a nice little amount of terrain that can be carried around easily. Hasn't taken us long to produce, and certainly didn't take very long to paint either. I'd say about 3 hours, sorted it all out. And within those 3 hours, probably could have done that amount all over again. So just a bit of Army Painter speed paints and a little bit of satin varnish, matte varnish at the end, just to tidy it all up and protect it. And that is basically it. So I hope you've enjoyed this short vlog. Would have been a lot longer if I'd explained the steps, but all you need to know is that it was speed paint and it was steps and there was colors everywhere and it was a mess. It was amazing, absolutely class. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. Leave your comments down below. Take care, stay safe, and see you again very soon.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.